Hello everyone, welcome to Your Questions on Astrology Answered Edition 6. Fantastic questions from my viewers on this video, including Parivartan, Combustion, Saturn delay marriage, many more. Check the full list in the box below, and don't forget also to post below the video if you have questions for me to answer. Make them general so they're good for everybody, and sub to my channel if you're new. Let's begin. Question from Dr. Gora Vishnal. I'm sorry if I haven't got that correct. How to see results of Parivartan Yoga in Vedic astrology? And many people have asked the same question, so let's look at this. Parivartan or Parivartan Yoga is called mutual reception in the Western system. It simply means that a lord of one sign has gone into another sign where the lord of that sign has gone into his sign. It's very simple to see. For example, here we have a chart with Aries rising, and Venus is in the first house in Aries, whereas Mars, Lord of Aries, has gone into the 7th house in Libra. There is a mutual exchange then between Venus and Mars, a Parivartan Yoga. Another example with the same Aries rising would be where Shani, Lord of Capricorn, has gone into Leo, and Sun, the Lord of Leo, has gone into Capricorn. A mutual exchange between these two planets. Now, the judgment of Parivartanan can get a little complicated because people put an emphasis on different things. I'm going to show you the system which I use and have actually found effective. You might think that the first consideration would be the planets involved. Are they friendly to each other? That would seem to make sense, wouldn't it? It's like if you exchanged a home with a friend, you'd be far more comfortable, wouldn't you? They come into your home, you go into their home, than if you exchanged a home with an enemy. It might seem that Venus Mercury exchanging would be great, no matter where they are, and that the Sun Saturn could never be good because they are enemies. Now, it is an important consideration, the planets involved, but really it's the houses themselves that are going to be the first and foremost judgment of the fruits of any Parivartan. So I'm going to show you how to do that, but don't forget as well, you could look in all Varga charts for Parivartan exchange. It's important to do so, particularly D9, D10 and D60. With this in mind, we can see that the favourable Parivartan exchange happens in the Kendra houses, the 1, 4, 7 and 10, and the trine, the 5 and 9 included, either between them or just trines and Kendra. I'm going to show you some examples. This Parivartan gives the most favourable indications because the planets are favourably placed in themselves. They are carrying positive energies into your life. And the other favourable indication is when you have an exchange between the 2nd house and the 11th house lord, or the 2nd house and the 10th house lord placed in these houses. There is also actually a very favourable Parivartan beside these, which is known as Karaka Parivartan. It is exceptionally favourable and a great blessing. I will talk about that at the end. Let's move ahead and look at some examples of the favourable Parivartan. By the way, these are just random choices, everybody. Don't forget there are so many variations of Parivartan Yoga as there are signs and houses. So just to give you an example how it works, say you've got Taurus rising in your chart and you have the lord of the 5th house, which will be Virgo. Mercury has gone to the 10th house, and the lord of Aquarius, one of the lords, Rahu, has gone to the 5th house. Don't forget, Aquarius has 2 rulers, Rahu and Shani. Now, normally the 5th house lord going into the 10th house, 6 houses away, would show conflict. But actually here, this mutual exchange between Mercury and Rahu, friendly to each other in any case, is good. It shows that education, even if there are breaks, shown by Rahu 5th house, are going to be good ultimately for the career, taking you to the top in any Mercurian career, teaching, communication, sales work, all of these things. Another favourable Parivartan, this time for Gemini rising, where the lord of the 4th house, which is Virgo, has gone into the 9th, and the lord of the 9th, Aquarius, Shani, has gone into the 4th house. Once again, there's a Kendra and trine involved, and Mercury and Shani are in any case favourable to each other. This would indicate a difficult home and family life in early life, no doubt, but that foreign land, foreign travel, even foreign settlement would be extremely favourable, and higher education there would also be excellent. An example of a favourable Parivartan, including the 2nd and 11th house, as I've shown you this time, Taurus rising. The 2nd house is Gemini. The Lord has gone into the 11th house, where the Lord Jupiter from Pisces has gone to the 2nd. Very favourable for increase of income and favourable factors giving opportunity for growth financially. Very strong and powerful Parivartan shown here for Pisces rising, where Jupiter, who is in fact the Lord of the whole chart, has gone into the 2nd house in Aries, and the Lord of Aries has gone into Sagittarius, Jupiter's sign, in the 10th house. Mars, Jupiter are in any case very friendly to each other, and this would show entrepreneurship, daring, leadership in the career, leading to enormous financial gain and even stability. Now, the more challenging Parivartan, when you had the 3rd house involved in any Parivartan, and even including Kendra and trine, if the 3rd house Lord is involved, it's difficult. There's quarrel, contention and strife. And the 6th, 8th and 12th Dustana houses, if they are involved once again in any way, in any Parivartan, including with Kendra and trine, it's going to be difficult. The 6th, 8th and 12th show suffering and challenges in your life. Once again, there are also many variations, but here's one. Capricorn rising, and the Lord of the 3rd house, Pisces, Jupiter, has gone to the 10th house, where the Lord of Libra has gone into that 3rd house. So this is a strife and challenge in the career definitely shown. Even though they are benefics, they're not even that friendly to each other completely. And there is definitely going to be challenges coming to you from your co-workers, colleagues in your communication. You might be very much misunderstood in your career. A lot of instability, even though there is opportunity, is shown. This time for Virgo rising, we have the 12th house Lord, who is of course Sun from Leo, has gone into the 8th house of Aries, where Mars has exchanged sign. Now, Sun and Mars have a friendly aspect to each other. Could take the edge off a little bit in that you will find a way around the problems, but you're going to have problems and issues here, definitely. How are they going to happen? Well, Sun is Lord of the 12th house of loss in business, loss in wills, legacies, etc. A lot of expenditure, particularly if you should go into foreign land. Finally, a challenging exchange for Aquarius Lagna, where the Lord of the 7th house, the Sun, has gone into the 6th house, and the Lord of the 6th house, the Moon, has gone into the 7th house. Challenges in relationships, a lot of emotional turmoil shown here, because the Lord of the 6th house is actually in the 7th house, showing conflicts, turmoil in relationships, and the Lord of the 7th in the 6th house. Definitely there will be legal factors involved also. But let me finish my answer to the question, everybody, on a very positive note. There is a great blessing Parivartan exchange called Karaka Parivartan. There are many variations. Let me show you one. In this Karaka Parivartan, first of all, we see that the exchange takes place from the Leo Lagna, where the Sun has gone into the 5th house, and Jupiter, Lord of Sagittarius, the 5th house, has gone into the 1st. But it's more than that. It's a Karaka exchange. Why? Because Jupiter is actually Karaka for the 5th house, and Sun is actually a natural Karaka for the 1st house. So this leads to an extremely divine blessing in this case, because the health of the native will be improved, the knowledge, education, even divine wisdom is coming in here, and children, creativity, education, it's all favorable. Look out for these Karaka Parivartans in your chart. Next, a question from Charbel Bachara. Would the divine interfere and alter certain major events that were meant to happen to someone according to their birth chart? Also, if there is any, what placements combinations show that a person is very blessed, helped, protected by God or angels? Such an interesting question. Thank you. So what you're asking is, can the divine God, the supreme being, interfere in human destiny? And would this be shown in the chart? And the answer is an affirmative yes. Most definitely the divine, the supreme being, is constantly interfering, if you like. I don't quite like to use that word interfering, but is constantly having manifestation in our lives that is subtly changing our karmas, but it depends on our reciprocation with this Supreme Being. We also need to understand, though, so I can answer the question, what is the birth chart, if it will show these factors. What is the birth chart? It's a contract from the moment of birth of any living entity, from a tree to an ant to a human being. What is the contract? How long will you be on this plane, Burloka? What karmas are you here to fulfill? There is always a curse. It's impossible to take birth here without a curse. That is what Burloka is for, to undergo these parabdala karmas, to rectify these past deeds. As well as this, on a subtle level, every single chart is intertwined. Everybody's destiny, every single living entity's destiny is so subtly and so deeply entwined with every other living entities. It is mind-boggling to think of this mesh of karmas that are going on. And yet the divine does interfere continually according to our reciprocation. Don't forget, the divine is always following and always with the Atma, never leaving the Atma in any incarnation, in any situation in this material world. So we are ever close to the divine, and indeed he is a witness to every single thought, every single activity in our many, many incarnations. But he leaves us free to fulfill our karmas and to continue on with our endless desires in this Maya and illusion. What else could he do? We have this innate freedom. In the great Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, the Supreme Being, says very clearly that according to the level of our surrender, of our calling on him, of our depending totally on him, he will intercede. He will help us with even the most difficult karmas. As far as seeing these indications in the birth chart, as you asked, you're looking for Jupiter, because Jupiter gives the inclination, according to past wisdom and karma, to depend on the Supreme. So Jupiter rising, Jupiter aspecting ascendant, Jupiter aspecting moon, sun, ruling planet, and also don't forget to look in the D9 and D60 in particular. Also, Jupiter interacting in any way with Ketu, the south node of the moon, gives a similar inclination, and with the Atmakaraka, the topmost and highest degree planet in the chart, which represents the karmas of the soul. In summary then, divine interference and divine reciprocation is always happening on gross and subtle levels. Very often when we can have a nightmare, we should know that some level of astral experience of a karma has happened that could have happened in a much more difficult way on this gross material plane. So yes, our surrender to the Supreme shows the extent to which these difficult karmas are removed. But remember, even a great soul, a great enlightened being like Arjuna in Mahabharata had to fight the battle of Kurukshetra. There was no getting away from those karmas. We have to face our karmas, but the Supreme will always intervene, make them more manageable without doubt. Next question from Manasi. How does Vedic astrology explain having a grand cross formation, fixed, cardinal or mutable, in the natal chart? Thank you so much for your question. And the answer is categorically no. The Vedic system does not consider these sort of aspects because, as I'm going to show you, the planets have specific aspects by site and by sign that would not incorporate it, barring in one specific instance that I'm going to show you. Nonetheless, I do welcome your question. I have experience in both Western and Vedic astrology, and therefore I like these sort of questions actually. Please bring them on where we can consider what's going on in either system. It's really interesting to consider. So let's look at the aspects which would actually form a grand cross, just in case some of you don't know. So to illustrate this, I have a North Indian chart with all of the signs put in around here. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, etc. Numbers represent the signs, by the way, not the houses in the Vedic system. I've simply put X to represent any potential planet. So a planet in Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, within a certain orb, say 2 to 3 degrees, would form a grand cross. The grand cross, of course, incorporates the opposition between Aries and Libra between Cancer and Capricorn, forming a cross in this way. But it also presumes a 90-degree angle also between the planets from Aries to Cancer, from Cancer to Libra, from Libra to Capricorn, and from Capricorn to Aries in this way. It's like a boxing in effect. It's generally assumed that if you have a grand cross in your chart like this, something is holding in energies, that the energies of the planets are virtually attacking each other. They are not harmonious because the opposition and the square aspect are taken to be negative. This particular grand cross, as it occurs in the cardinal signs, is known as a cardinal grand cross. Equally, a fixed sign grand cross could be formed in this way between Taurus, Leo, Scorpio and Aquarius. Also a mutable or dual sign grand cross with planets in Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius and Pisces. So why is there no grand cross in the Vedic system, as I've just said? Although it does happen in one instant, I'm going to show you where it's actually happening in a very strong way. The reason is that the aspects in the Vedic system are not like in the Western system. Without giving a whole lecture on it, basically aspects are specific to the planets. And it's a very spiritual and intuitive thing. It goes very, very deep. Not every planet has the same sight. And there are more than just sight or drishti aspects. There are also fixed rasi aspects that are there as well. So you will see that it's impossible for there to be 4 square aspects at any time. The only planet that has a square aspect is Mars with a 4th aspect. So let's just have a quick look at this. Here are the aspects by sight of all the planets in Vedic astrology. I'm not going to go through them all, but what you should know is that each of these aspects are specific to the planets. And apart from the opposition, which is always mutual, every planet has a 7th sight aspect. So there is always a mutual opposition aspect. There is only one square aspect from Mars, but the other planet would not be giving a square aspect back. So without mutual sight of square or 90-degree angle, there is no question of there being by sight a grand cross in Vedic astrology. There is, however, the possibility by sign aspect. As some of you may know, every sign has a specific aspect called rasi aspect. The cardinal signs aspect the fixed signs. The fixed signs are cardinal signs. So there would be no grand cross there because it would not be 90 degree. But the mutable sign Gemini will aspect Virgo, Sagittarius and Pisces, forming a complete grand cross, as will the other mutable signs Virgo, Sagittarius and Pisces. So there is a mutable grand cross caused by the rasi aspect in the Vedic system. Is what you would see if you had Aries rising and planets in these dual or mutable signs. So there is a grand cross, but it's not given the same meaning, that boxing in hemmed meaning. It's actually just depending on the planets involved and what karmas they are carrying, the mutual aspects between these signs. But for sure, it is a grand cross. Now, should we even be mixing and matching in this way from Vedic to Western? Well, here's the problem. Actually, we shouldn't. It isn't wholesome to do so, basically. Although you're probably all going to comment below that I have actually used sometimes Western aspects like a grand cross and very often T-square in my transit predictions. Why? Because when we're looking at transits, configurations in the sky, it's useful to do so. When we are, however, looking at individual chart karma and the unfolding of a personal karma, these aspects do not help at all. They do not show the karmas. So I would say use for transits if you know them. They can be helpful, but not for the deep personal karmas. I hope I've somewhat answered your question. Healing Alternative has a question. Does Combust Venus get better with age? Interesting idea. Let's discuss. First of all, though, do you actually have a Combust Venus, or does anybody? Because here's the thing. There's quite a bit of contention about what constitutes combustion as an aspect in astrology. Most astrologers say that Venus has an orb of 9 degrees in the Vedic system. So if you've got Sun at 10 degrees Aries, let's say, Venus would be in orb of combustion from 1 degree Aries until 19 degrees Aries. However, you may like to consider that Pandit Sanjay Rath has said that no planet can be combusted if they are actually traveling ahead of the Sun, because then they are not being blocked by the rays of the Sun. So say you've got the Sun again, 10 degrees Aries, and you've got Venus at, say, 15 degrees Aries, going ahead of the Sun, going in direct motion, then that is not a combustion. With this in mind, let's consider carefully what a combust Venus would entail. Basically, the water of Venus, the jala that is Venus, is being burnt up and evaporated by the Sun the closer Venus is to exact combustion. So many of the Venus factors, the karaka significance of Venus, get burnt up. Literally burn up. So relationships can burn out. There can be difficulties with children, childbirth sometimes. There can be monetary factors that are very difficult and out of control. Very important that you see aspect to Venus though, because a favorable aspect of Jupiter, as always, can help with this considerably. But of course your question was, does combust Venus get better with age? Do things calm down when you get older? The answer is, on its own, definitely not. Things just don't calm down. We take these karma to the next and the next birth unless we deal with them. We could even make them worse in this life. You have to see many factors to see how you will deal with it, particularly D9. You may have been thinking perhaps that when Venus matures at age 25, things will calm down, but actually far from it. That's when Venus gets strongest, and just like all planets that mature, that's when they really come into play. So Venus being combust, wow, that's when this hot Venus is going to start creating issues in your life from that time. So what do you do? How can you calm things down? The number one thing you have to do, because according to Pandit Sanjay Rath's school, these Venus karmas are coming from difficult, really difficult, sinful papa karmas connected to Venus. So Venus is now being burned by the Sun. The sins or the papa is being burned out. So with this combust Venus, you attract difficult situations where you have to deal with things that you've done past life being done to you perhaps, or you become tempted by very difficult, sometimes immoral situations, or you are just having difficulties with females, full stop, whether you are male or female, because Venus represents females. So what can you do about this combust Venus? Gain awareness. It's the awareness that helps us to learn the lessons and remedy the actions by being totally moral in relationships, with children, with childbirth, within marriage if possible, when you're doing everything that you can to keep to the moral, straight and narrow, basically being honorable in relationships, honorable to women, being moral around spending money, etc. The higher the moral values, the more you will deal with this combustion, and yes, it will improve over time, but only with personal action, personal remedy. Finally, let's look at a chart of someone who's definitely getting on in life and has a very strong and potent combustion of Venus in their chart. Yes, of course, it's Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, 57 years of age, and he has just married his third wife, Carrie, a few months ago. Venus exact in a combustion at 5 degrees Gemini with the Sun and retrograde, and indeed Rahu is also there. Rahu, of course, is breaking down all the boundaries, and Venus Sun is inflaming the passion. So basically, Boris Johnson now on his third marriage, and of course, he's had many affairs during his second marriage, maybe his first marriage, I don't know, but he certainly had many affairs, so his last wife said, and at least one illegitimate child, if not more. So Boris Johnson, many children, some legitimate, some not, and on his third marriage. Now, what are the karmas that Boris Johnson carries with this Venus? We can see it by the rulership. Second house, family and moral values. Ninth house, religion, guru, priest, and teacher. Now, to marry his third wife, Carrie, he had to virtually reconvert to the old religion he had actually been born into, Catholicism. He was born a Catholic, but he converted to the Protestant religion when he was at University Church of England. But because Carrie was a Catholic, he had to actually go to a priest, ninth house. He had to take lessons in Catholicism, I would imagine again, and go through a lot of re-instruction for him to be able to marry in a Catholic church. And they would say this was his first marriage, because unless you marry in a Catholic church to a Catholic, far as the Catholic Church is concerned, you're not married. But to conclude, and in a way to answer your question, it's clear that Boris Johnson, in this way, this very strong Venus-Sun conjunction, is now undergoing a sort of purging of these karmas, of these past Venus karmas. Let's see how it goes. And you might be interested to know that Rahu is now transiting in the ninth house of his chart, conjuncting, of course, or in the same sign as Mercury, the Lord and dispositor of this combustion. And by the way, Mercury also his Ashtama Shani. Wow, it's really heavy stuff here for Boris Johnson. We can only wish him the best with this, and that a sort of transformation will occur for him. A question from Susanna 13. Can you talk about a combusted Mercury? I certainly can, and thank you for your question. To explore a combustion of Mercury, though, I must just go over a little more detail of what a combustion is actually doing, perhaps more than I did when I've just discussed Combust Venus. You see, a combustion means that the rays of the planet, whichever planet it is, have been obscured by the sun. And in this way, the avasta, or the actual nature of the planet, is changed. It's not actually working in the same way in your birth chart. More than this, the fire of the sun, which is burning in this combustion, the nature of the planet, you have to understand what fire is actually doing. You see, fire, represented by Agni in the Vedic system, is actually a entity with two heads. You see, Agni, fire element, has two heads. One head is the cursing and the burning, the pain-giving factor, as the past sins are burnt out. But the other head is giving blessings as he takes your prayers to the gods. Therefore, the combustion of any planet, including Mercury, Venus, etc., is going to definitely cause you some pain and some difficulty, but also gives a great chance of redemption and blessing coming also. So it should be obvious then that when Mercury, Buddha, who rules learning and intelligence, is combusted, then there is definitely some frustration in learning, in schoolwork, in university work. There is some definite frustration here. What's happening is there is a real impatience, a difficulty listening to others. Mercury's self-confidence is badly damaged in combustion. There is a lack of confidence in the inner self, a lack of self-belief. Therefore, easily agitated, easily becomes defensive, angry, on edge, and it really damages relationships. Now, one thing you will often see with a Mercury, no matter what sign, in some way this will be there is a sharpness of the speech. Sometimes it's very witty, sometimes it's caustic, sometimes it's really hurtful, but whatever it is, a person with a combust Mercury, the speech is sharp. It's like an arrow. And what's happening is it's coming from past life hurt. That hurt is still there subconsciously, and the combustion of Mercury is bringing it out, and it's coming out unconsciously. They don't even realize how their words are actually harming, and it's something that has to be taken care of. In some people, though, a combust Mercury can almost go in the opposite direction because the sun's purifying rays have taken over the mind. And what's happened is, because the sun is Dharma, purity, righteousness, combust Mercury can just follow this Dharma, follow authority with no questions, no problem, and can actually find correct action path in life intuitively. Have a great intuition. So when combust Mercury listens to their inner voice, that's not themselves, by the way, that is actually God or the dharmic voice inside them, they always make correct choices. So what to do if you have this Combust Mercury? How can you actually do remedy for this? First of all, you have to try to listen to others more, be more patient, and be a little less focused on yourself. You see, Mercury in this way is very inwardly driven. You're not looking at others objectively at any moment. So trying to have an awareness of the effect of your speech, of everything that you say, is very, very important. And it isn't just speech, it's everything that you write as well. So finally then, just like with Combust Venus, it's all about gaining awareness and making adjustments that will actually help you to get the better of these karmas. And don't forget, the blessings are definitely there. Great intuition and great insight when you listen to the voice within. A question from Laura Fahy, or maybe that's Fahy, sorry Laura. Laura says, could you please talk about the midheaven and the signs that are MC? Thank you for this question. So what exactly is the midheaven? On any horoscope, equal house system, or any other Vedic horoscope, you will normally see the midheaven marked as a mathematical point. What it is, it's the exact point of midday, where the sun was at the highest point in the sky on the day you were born. It's used mostly as a common reference point for the 10th house cusp in any unequal house system. In the Western horoscopes, there's so many unequal house system used. You can take your pick really. And in the Vedic system, it's the Bhava Chalit chart. So the ascendant is the eastern horizon, and the midheaven is the topmost point of the sky where the sun was at noon. So this will actually vary according to where you are born and season of birth. Now, in the Western system, it's been given enormous importance. It's become more than just 10th house cusp in an unequal house chart. It's actually become a reference point, which is aspected by so many different Western aspects and is supposed to tell you your career and what you will do in the world. At least that's how it's used in the Western astrology system, but actually it doesn't do that. Therefore, it's a very misleading thing to judge aspects of planets to the midheaven. In fact, in the Western system where it is done, there are so many aspects, the sextile, trine, square, 150-degree aspect, so many that it becomes totally confusing. But essentially, it doesn't actually give us the information it is supposed to do. Let me show you with just a few charts. So here's Johnny Depp with his Rasi or Vedic chart. As you can see, always sign for a house system as normal, with Aries on the 10th house cusp from Cancer rising. When we are judging career, we are judging the Lord of the 10th house as the first significator. By the way, everybody, it's not the only one. You have to go far deeper. In fact, let me give you a big secret. The moon chart gives far more indication of career. I will post a video on that soon. Why? Because the moon chart is you in society. It's so important. And of course, the D10 chart tells us so much else. Check the video on my channel, link below. But let's look at the MC. Here it is, 24 degrees Pisces. When we read a point, we have to read the sign. Pisces is a sign of spirituality, travel, intuition. It's a sign of artistry in some sense, but Jupiter is about guru, teaching. It's not really about acting. But if we just take the Lord of the 10th house, Mars, it tells us everything we need to know. This Lord has gone into Leo, the sign of the actor. A very glamorous and powerful placement. Many of his roles were actually Martian, like Pirates of the Caribbean. What can I say? And having a fourth aspect onto the 5th house itself of creativity and acting. Another chart, Amy Winehouse, a famous singer, songwriter, such a unique and powerful voice, a very unique person with a tragic end, of course. So basically, It's Aquarius ruling the 10th house in actuality. The MC itself is in Capricorn, both Saturn ruled, but it's the Rahu factor that's taking over here. If we look to the MC Capricorn to tell us about her career, it doesn't tell us anything at all worth knowing. Capricorn is about government work, traditional work, corporations, so on, corporate boss, etc. It's not really having anything to do with singing, performing, or the voice in any way. But let's look at her actual chart. The 10th house is Aquarius. Ruler is Rahu in the first house. Powerful placement in Taurus. Taurus is the throat, the voice, and singing without doubt, and has a fifth aspect once again on the 5th house of performance and creativity. If you like, we can follow through the ruler of Capricorn. It's in an exalted state, that's true, but in the 6th house where there is conflict, litigation, difficulty, contention, etc. It's also the lord of the 10th house, but it is Amy Winehouse, Saturnian or Rahu? Just look at Amy Winehouse and you have the answer. She's pure Rahu, 100%. And this is ruling her chart in the first house. And the ruler of the 10th, I won't go through it again. The 10th house and the Lord tells us so much about our career. All confirmed in her D10 chart, by the way. So the MC, I'm afraid, is not helping us at all to ascertain career or attainment in life. So I'm really sorry to be disappointing not to go through all the signs for you of the midheaven, but they won't have any function in your chart. Truly, they won't, unless you put them on the 10th house cusp and just read the rulership in that way in an equal house system. If you want to know how I use Bhava chart, check the link below to another in my series of Any Questions. A question from Marlies Perner. Hi, my question. What is Ashtama Shani actually doing? I'm in it. Saturn transit the 8th house from the moon, and it's so intense. I bet it is. Let me talk about this. So Saturn's transit to the moon are one of the glories of the Vedic system. They show us a great karmic event in our life that everybody must go through every 28 years. Now, there are different types of Saturn transit to the moon. The most common, of course, that we all know is Sadhisati, when Saturn is in the 12th house from your natal moon, in the house of your natal moon or sign of your natal moon, and the 2nd house or sign to your natal moon. This is Sadhisati. So to understand the 7.5 years of Sadhisati, please check on my channel for the video Sadhisati. I go through every phase of the transit for you. After that, the next big time will be when Saturn goes in the 4th house from the moon. This is one of those Combust Shani transits when Saturn acts like a thorn in your side. It's most frustrating time with a lot of family and relationship difficulties. And finally, as you are discussing the other major transit, most definitely is when Saturn goes into the 8th house from the moon for 2.5 years, known as Ashtama Shani. It's extremely trying, of course, because Saturn in this house is actually having an aspect onto the moon by 6th aspect and is himself 8 aspects from the moon. So this 6th, 8th aspect is why it's so intense. It's bringing back the sudden shocks and it's given many difficulties and conflicts. So you ask me, why is it so intense? Or what is it really doing? What is Ashtama Shani really doing? What it's doing is it's bringing back immediate karmas to you. I've seen many times you may have done some nefarious activity, or mightn't even be nefarious, but just a little things that you've skipped, or, you know, those karmic things that, you know, that wasn't good. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done this. Often these sort of karmas are said to come back to you. These minor punishments come back in the Ashtama Shani. And if you're a major criminal, wow, just wait until Ashtama Shani comes, or you won't escape the law anymore when Saturn goes in the 8th house from your moon. General effects that are found in Ashtama Shani specifically, I found most importantly, are unexpected events. It's always something sudden, like a sudden illness, sudden admission to hospital, I've seen quite a few times, a sudden financial blow, a sudden change in relationship status. Whatever it is, it comes on suddenly, quickly, because that's the nature of the 8th aspect. Apart from this, there's often a feeling of being trapped in Ashtama Shani. It's a sort of intense feeling of frustration and being held back. It's hard to move, to make a generally potent change in your life at this time. You feel as though you just can't do the things you thought would be so easy to do before. If you got married a few years before, all of a sudden it feels a little entrapping, not what you expected. Be patient. You have to go through this time. If you started a new job maybe before Ashtama Shani, all of a sudden it's full of frustration, difficulty, and you think, I've absolutely made the wrong choice. This is a situation that Ashtama Shani puts you in, a restricting, almost prison-like situation, but it's actually testing you for your endurance. At the aspect Saturn makes from the 8th house, we see more exact detail of what's going to happen. Saturn has a 3rd aspect onto the 10th house. Many people can even lose a job in this period. More common though, there's a big change in the workplace. There can be a new boss, a change in management. If you are in management, enormous pressure put on you. And the 10th aspect by this transit onto the 5th house, educational course has to be completely changed sometimes. A big change in education often seen. And also frustration dealing with your children, childbirth, etc. can sometimes be seen. So it's obvious with so many difficulties that you might think, what on earth is going on? What is this Saturn Ashtama Shani? What am I being tested about? You're being tested for your patience, for your endurance, and your ability to go through difficulties and stay strong. So what you'll be asked to do is not argue. Avoid, above all things, arguments with others. When you have Saturn in the 8th house from your moon, unless the other person also has this transit, you're probably going to come out the worst. You will come out the loser in any argument whatsoever. Big arguments, legal arguments definitely, or just domestic arguments. You will not win the argument in this transit. In fact, so many people come to astrologers in this Ashtama Shani. What can I do? It's just so intense. As you say, I just feel like the weight of the world is on my shoulder. You have to paciate Saturn immediately. Fast on a Saturday. Take advantage of every chance to do charity for disabled people, animals, old people, people who are disadvantaged, and show the Saturnian most important requirement, patience. And you'll get through this, learn the lessons, and things will definitely be far better for you enduring the hardships. Sounds a bit harsh, but that's what it's all about. Ashtama Shani is a test we all have to face about 3 times, maybe even 4 times in our life. Question from Prem Chopra. Do really Rahu Ketu become Yogakarakas on certain conditions given by Parashara? Thank you. Yes, indeed they do, and I'm going to show you how that happens. First of all, some of you may not know what Yogakaraka is. For certain ascendants, some planets become extremely strong, and even if they are malefic, they take you to the greatest potential in this life. Let's just have a quick look at them. So here's a list now of all the zodiac signs, Aries to Pisces, and the Yogakarakas for certain zodiac signs, or lagnas actually. So the ascendant of Taurus, Saturn is Yogakaraka. For Cancer it's Mars, for Leo it's Mars, for Libra Shani, Capricorn Venus, and Aquarius Venus. Why? Why are they Yogakarakas? Because to be a Yogakaraka planet, you have to rule a Kendra, 1, 4, 7, 10, and Trikone, 5, 9 as well. You should have these ascendants as marked here in your chart when the Yogakaraka Mahadasha comes along, say you're Taurus. When Shani Mahadasha comes, you will have the chance for advancement in your life. For Cancer Lagna, Mars Mahadasha, etc. This Yogakaraka can take you to greatness depending on its placement. However, Rahu and Ketu do also become Yogakarakas, and let's just consider what Parashara says about this. In the relevant chapter then, Abrihat Parashara Horashastra, we have the following verse, just at the very top here, following slokas. Rahu and Ketu are predominantly giving the effects due to their conjunction with the house lord or the house they occupy. And here's the key thing that we're of course looking to see. Rahu and or Ketu, if they are in Kendra, receiving an aspect or association with the lord of a cone, that's a trine house, or a Kendra, 1479, it will become Yogakaraka. Let's see how that could be. Here we have again the chart of an Aries Lagna. As you can see, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, and so on. And although Aries doesn't have a Yogakaraka traditionally, according to Parashara, Rahu in this instant has become a Yogakaraka. How is this happening? Because Rahu is in a Kendra house and has association of Mercury, the lord of a Kona or trine house. So Rahu is actually going to have a very strong play in this destiny of this individual and could bring great things in Rahu Mahadasha. Rahu, of course, is in a good sign, Libra, which increases this. Oh, very special case here for Taurus rising, where Rahu is in the 7th house, Kendra house, having association of Shani, lord of a Kona, trine house, Capricorn, and a Kendra also, both. And Saturn in a Digbala, extremely strong Shani here, but makes Rahu Yogakaraka in association with himself, who is Yogakaraka also. It's extremely powerful conjunction. In fact, if you care to check the video on my channel on the Rahu-Saturn conjunction itself, you will see that such a position actually becomes a Raj Yoga. Another example of Rahu Ketu in Kendra, this time for Gemini Lagna, where you might have Rahu in the 4th house Virgo, aspected by Saturn in Cancer in the 3rd house. You notice we've got a debilitated Saturn here. It doesn't matter the aspect coming onto Rahu, because Shani is the 9th house lord from Aquarius, a trine lord, makes Rahu a great Yogakaraka in this chart. Now, two world leaders for whom Rahu in the 10th house has become a powerful Yogakaraka. Once again, it's Boris Johnson, PM of the UK. In this case, Rahu in the 10th house is actually very, very close to Venus. Venus in Gemini, I've just been talking about on this video, a Combust Venus. But in this case, Venus, of course, is the lord of a Trikone of the 9th house, and so brings Rahu to Yogakaraka status. Another extremely powerful example of Rahu acting as Yogakaraka and bringing someone to greatness in the 10th house of career is Donald J. Trump. Rahu in Kendra, of course, is aspected by the Sun, Lord of the First, a Trikone and Kendra both. And of course, Mars, the other Yogakaraka of Leo, is in the 1st house. Two powerful Yogakarakas. Donald Trump was destined for this rise in life. So I hope I answered your question. Yes, most definitely. Rahu and Ketu, as per Parashara, is most certainly going to become Yogakaraka. Mostly can be seen from Rahu. If you know any examples of Ketu, post below. What you're looking for, once again, just to recap, Rahu and Ketu must be in the Kendra 1, 4, 7, 10, and they must be aspected by Kendra Lord or Trikone Lord, or have association with that Lord. I hope that was helpful. It's a most definite rise in power, a most definite Yogakaraka. Next, a question from Sabrina M, who says, how long can Saturn delay marriage? Is it right up to late 40s or into 50s? People say Saturn delay until after 36, but for me, it's gotten into 40s. Thank you, Sabrina, for your question. So it's certainly true that Saturn having aspect onto the 7th house, 3rd, 7th, 10th aspect, or indeed sitting in the 7th house or conjunct the lord of the 7th house, might cause delay in suitable marriage happening. That can most definitely be seen. Don't forget, even Capricorn 7th house, Aquarius 7th house can have a similar effect. But to decide that it's all going to end, it's all going to just evaporate, all of these karmas, when Saturn matures, is actually not the case. What does tend to happen, though, is that an early marriage is frequently not successful, and that after 36, generally marriage is more successful. Now, everything depends, though, on the individual karmas of Saturn. So you've not even said where Saturn is by sign, Sabrina, or where Saturn is in your D9. So much else which you have to see, or even how Saturn is influencing marriage factors in your chart. So generally then, let me answer this by showing you a few charts as well. Here is the extraordinary 7th house of Johnny Depp, the famous actor. As you can see, Shani is Yogakaraka, such a powerful planet at 29 degrees Capricorn. Own sign, very strong indeed, very powerful karmas. And retrograde, even more powerful, extraordinary actually. The only planet in Kendra and the ruler of his 7th house in the 7th house. He's come here for these relationship karmas, and that's the end of it. Okay, so what is his history of relationships? It's quite extraordinary. He married early at age 20. It lasted 2 years. He went on to have about 6 engagements, asked so many people to marry him, and in the end married again at age 52, well above 36. 36 was not particularly anything to do with a second marriage. So what you do see is, though, early marriage and a great gap until the next commitment. Real marriage happens again. Once again, the last marriage to Amber Heard only lasted a very short time. But once again, check the video on the D9 analysis where I give Johnny Depp's relationships a full breakdown, and we see them in the D9 chart, exactly the karmas that are actually behind this 7th house Saturn. The chart of David Bowie now with an extremely strong Shani in the 7th house. This time the ruler of his chart, which is Capricorn, and it is a debilitated in Cancer Shani, but retrograde, so overcomes that debilitation completely, becomes a strong force in his success and his karmas, but conjunct to the moon, lord of the 7th house, just like Johnny Depp, such strong relationship karmas. David Bowie married at age 23 to Angie Bowie. It was a marriage of convenience. He said so, she said so she could get a visa to live in the country. So that petered out. And then it was a long time, well beyond 36, until he married again in his 40s, which was a lasting commitment until he died. Don't forget to post your own questions for me below this video. If you're new to my channel, sub below. Goodbye for now, and God bless everyone.